In 1944, German High Command in France received a gift, an impossible gift. By pure dumb luck, a set of documents washed ashore, recovered from a destroyed Allied boat. These documents contained operational plans, not just any plans. They outlined troop movements, landing zones, and target locations for the single greatest invasion in human history. They were the real, genuine, top-secret plans for D-Day. The German generals looked at this intelligence, this war-winning information, and they threw it in the trash. They laughed it off. They were convinced it was a fake. A plant, an elaborate trick. Why? Why would they ignore the most important truth of the entire war? Because 1 year earlier, they had been fooled by a single dead body, a body that changed the course of World War II twice. This is the story of Operation Mincemeat. In early 1943, the war was at a tipping point. The Allies had driven the Germans and Italians out of North Africa. The next logical step, the next great invasion, had to be Europe. Winston Churchill called it the soft underbelly of Europe. The target was Sicily. There was just one massive problem. Hitler knew it. You didn't need to be a military genius to look at a map. Sicily was the obvious logical target. And because it was obvious, Hitler was turning it into an impenetrable fortress. He was pouring in elite panzer divisions, U-boats, and tens of thousands of veteran troops. He was planting minefields and building concrete bunkers. The Allies were trapped. A direct invasion of Sicily would be a suicidal bloodbath. The beaches would run red, but they had to invade Sicily to open the door to Italy. So they had to solve an impossible riddle. How do you invade the one place everyone knows you're going to invade? The answer? You don't. You make them look somewhere else. You make them, with absolute certainty, believe you were going anywhere else. The target they chose was Greece. Now, they just had to convince Hitler. A team of British intelligence officers, led by Ewan Montagu and Charles Cholmondeley, gathered in a smoky London basement. They were part of the 20 Committee, a group dedicated to deception. The idea they landed on was so insane, so macabre, it was almost brilliant. It was based on a small note from a memo written by, of all people, Ian Fleming, the future creator of James Bond. The plan. Don't send a message. Don't try to break their codes. Don't use a double agent. Instead, find a dead body. Dress it as a British officer. Give him fake top-secret plans and just drop him in the ocean and let the enemy find him. They called it Operation Mincemeat. The first step was the hardest. They needed a body. This couldn't be a soldier. It couldn't be anyone with a family that would ask questions. They needed someone who, in life, would not be missed. They found him in a cold London morgue. The body of Glinda Michael, a homeless man who had tragically died after ingesting rat poison. The cause of death was perfect. The poison had created fluid in his lungs, something that a pathologist would easily mistake for drowning. He was the perfect, anonymous vessel for their lie, but a body wasn't enough. They needed to create a person, a life, and so Major William Martin of the Royal Marines was born. This is where the plan went from a clever idea to a work of absolute genius. The team understood that if this was going to fool German High Command, it couldn't just be a body with a letter. It had to be real. The lie had to be perfect, down to the smallest detail. They gave Major Martin a life. They put items in his pockets. The pocket litter, they called it. A set of keys. Stubs from a London theatre ticket. A letter from his father. They even created a fiancée for him, named Pam. They got a photograph of an MI5 clerk to use as her picture. And then they wrote love letters. Passionate, personal love letters, which they tucked into his wallet, along with a receipt for an engagement ring. They even went so far as to get an angry letter from his bank manager, demanding he pay his overdraft. Why? Because these details, these tiny, insignificant pieces of a man's life, that's what makes a person real. That's what sells the lie. Then came the centerpiece. They put a black briefcase on a chain and attached it to the major's wrist. Inside, they placed the bait. It wasn't a big, official-looking document stamped top secret. That would be too obvious. Instead, it was a series of casual personal letters between high-ranking British generals. Letters that just happened to discuss the upcoming invasion plans. The letters carelessly mentioned that the Allies were planning to invade Greece and Sardinia. And most importantly, they mentioned that the Allies were setting up a decoy operation. to make the Germans think they were going to invade Sicily. It was a masterful double bluff. They were telling Hitler that the truth was actually the lie. Now they had to deliver the package. Major Martin's body was fragile. It couldn't be frozen, or an autopsy would reveal it. It had to be kept fresh. The body was placed in a special airtight steel canister packed with dry ice. It was labeled optical instruments and loaded onto the submarine, HMS Seraph. The crew of the submarine was told they were transporting a top-secret weather device. Only the captain and his officers knew what was truly inside. They sailed for days to the coast of Huelva in neutral Spain. Why Spain? Because everyone knew Spain was only neutral on paper. In reality, it was crawling with German spies and Abwehr agents, all desperate for any scrap of Allied intelligence. In the pre-dawn darkness, the submarine surfaced. The officers opened the canister. They carefully lowered the body of Major William Martin into the waves. They even read Psalm 39, "I will keep my mouth with a bridle while the wicked is before me." They pushed him out to sea, and then they sailed away. All they could do now was wait. A few hours later, a Spanish fisherman found the body. He towed it to shore. The news spread like wildfire. A British major found dead with a briefcase chained to his wrist. The Spanish authorities, just as the British had hoped, immediately notified their German friends in the town. The German Abwehr agent in Huelva, a man named Adolf Klaus, went into a frenzy. He had to see what was in that briefcase. The Spanish performed a quick, sloppy autopsy. Just as planned, they ruled the death as drowning. The British in London began to play their part. They sent frantic, top-secret telegrams to Spain, demanding the return of the briefcase, unopened, saying it contained sensitive documents. This, of course, only made the Germans more desperate to open it. The Germans bribed a Spanish official. They were given the briefcase for a few short hours. They carefully steamed open the envelopes. They photographed everything: the official plans, the personal letters, the love note from Pam, the bank overdraft letter. They sent the entire package, every perfect crafted detail, directly to Berlin, right onto the desk of Adolf Hitler. In Berlin, the German intelligence analysts were ecstatic, but some were skeptical. It seemed too easy. But then they looked closer. They read the love letters. They saw the theatre stubs. They saw the angry letter from the bank. This couldn't be a fake. Why would anyone create such a detailed, such a human backstory? Why include a bank overdraft? It was too personal. It was too messy. It had to be real. The final deciding voice was Hitler himself. He was completely, totally fooled. He was convinced. On May 12, 1943, Hitler issued a direct order. Measures regarding Sardinia and Greece, he commanded, are to take precedence over all else. He had swallowed the bait, hook, line, and sinker. He ordered an entire elite panzer division to be moved from France to Greece. He sent troops, planes, and U-boats to reinforce Sardinia. He diverted critical resources away from Sicily. The man who never was had single-handedly rewritten Hitler's battle plans. 2 months later, on July 9, 1943, the Allies launched Operation Husky, the invasion of Sicily. Over 150,000 troops stormed the beaches, and instead of the fortress they expected, instead of a wall of steel and fire, they found a surprisingly light defense. The invasion was a massive success. Sicily fell. The Allies had their foothold in Europe. Mussolini was overthrown, and Italy was knocked out of the war. The British sent one final brilliant telegram to their team in Spain. It read simply, "Mincemeat swallowed whole." But the story doesn't end there, because Operation Mincemeat had one final, accidental, and utterly devastating consequence. Fast forward 1 year, 1944. The Allies are planning the real invasion, D-Day, and by a 1 in a million chance, a total accident, a set of real D-Day plans fall directly into German hands. The German High Command looks at these plans, the plans for a landing at Normandy, and they remember the British major. They remember the personal letters. They remember the elaborate trick they fell for in Sicily. They look at the real plans for Normandy, and they see another Operation Mincemeat. They were convinced it was another elaborate fake, another deception. They believed the real invasion must be at Pas-de-Calais, the most obvious target. The one time the Allies accidentally told them the truth, the Germans thought it was the most brilliant lie. Because of mincemeat, they kept their main panzer divisions away from Normandy. holding them in reserve for the real invasion at Calais that would never come. Operation Mincemeat didn't just fool Hitler once, it created a shadow, a seed of doubt in the German mind that was so powerful. It blinded them to the truth, even when it was staring them.